You are listening to the International Radio Report. Your reactions are much appreciated. Feel free to send them to radioreport@yahoo.com. That is, radioreport@yahoo.com. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the International Radio Report for Sunday, July the 27th. My name's Sheldon. I am here with Jill. We thank you for tuning in to our show here on CKUT-FM in Montreal. We have a lot of stories for you today, for a little bit from around the planet and some things going on closer to home. So we'll get rolling right away with a story from Radio Inc., written by Cameron Coates. The headline is, "What does radio do when a legend dies?" When a core artist dies, radio can't afford to miss the moment. It's a chance to connect, to lead the conversation, and to remind listeners why the medium unites. Ozzy Osbourne's death on Tuesday was one of those moments, and two of the country's biggest rock stations wasted no time in rising to the occasion. iHeartMedia New York's 104.3 Q104 pivoted within minutes. The news came through at about 2:15, and program director Eric Big E Wellman told Radio Inc., "We were on the air with it and playing wall-to-wall Ozzy and Sabbath music at 2:20. Wellman immediately consulted trusted staff on how far the station should go in marking the loss. "We all agreed this was pull out all stops," said Wellman. "For nearly 5 hours, the format was abandoned in favor of an all-Aussie tribute, including custom tribute production, voiced and delivered within the hour." On Wednesday, the station continued honoring Osbourne with double shots leading each set and continued to play throughout middays. In Los Angeles, the urgency was just as high. KLOS had its morning team on the air within 7 minutes of confirmation. Within 30 minutes, Matt Pinfield and Nick Carter were in studio as well. The calls were still coming in by the time the Alice Cooper show started on Tuesday night, non-stop. Rather than focus solely on music, KLOS leaned into storytelling. Many stories were from inside the building. Knowing Ozzy was so delicate, the world knew it might not be long. So we celebrate his work, what he meant, all those he touched, with his brilliance in music and TV. Finding the right tone during these moments is a delicate balance of celebration, reverence, and shared cultural memory. It's always tricky to find the right level when one of our artists dies, said Wellman. It is always a celebration of life, but there's a lot of nostalgia that goes into it. We see our job as connecting the community together. Every artist's situation is different. The passing of someone unexpected, like Taylor Hawkins, drummer of Foo Fighters, he said, demands a different tone than someone whose health had declined publicly. But in every case, the moment demands attention. Great stations connect with the audience, mirror the audience. So if our listeners are feeling it, we're there with them, right beside them. For both programmers, owning the moment when a core artist passes isn't optional, it's foundational. This is one of the most important things we can do. It's part of why we exist, said Wellman. You just need to be ready when it happens. There was amazing amounts of coverage, both radio and television. I noticed BBC World News on television just dropped everything, and it was wall-to-wall coverage as well. So, it's a well-known celebrity. It happens in many cases. They pointed out a few of them in the article. And we heard similar things with not a radio personality or a musician, but Hulk Hogan, the world-famous wrestler. Same sort of thing happened with that. So media is ready for these things. I think they know when something is coming. In the case of Osbourne, his health was really bad, and they knew something was probably going to happen sooner than later. In other cases, it happens without notice, and then they have to, kick things into gear. So interesting how this one unfolded so quickly.
The average age of some of those older rock and rollers, it's something that I think they prepare themselves, because at any time, we never know when a big name will show up in that list, unfortunately.
I think the last one I remember that I found so shocking was Prince.
Yeah.
It was purely accidental, and that sort of made it even worse. And people were really just overwhelmed by that. And I know there was immediate reaction via radio. This is most of these artists. People were exposed to them by radio in the first place.
Yep.
So radio was where they went, I think, in many cases to find what the reaction was going to be.
In our next news item, we have 8 former VOA directors that oppose the closure, and this is via RadioWorld. 8 former directors of the Voice of America have told a court that they support the current director's legal challenge to the dismantling of VOA by the Trump administration. The group filed an amicus brief in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. They are Danford Austin, Amanda Bennett, Mary Bitterman, Jeffrey Cohen, David Ensor, Robert Riley, Chase Untermeyer, and Sanford Ungar. The law firm that filed the brief described the group as bipartisan. Among other things, the directors described the past situations in which they pushed back against pressure to influence coverage from both sides of the political aisle, and in which they reported on America's own foibles under both parties to demonstrate to people across the world the value of a free press they could aspire to, according to a summary by the firm Foley Hogue, which filed the brief. The brief presents evidence of VOA's 80-year history as a force for American foreign policy influence through credible, accurate, unbiased reporting to audiences numbering in the hundreds of millions across the world, many of whom would otherwise lack access to news they could trust. In March, President Trump signed an executive order dismantling the U.S. Agency for Global Media, calling it corrupt, wasteful, and biased. The USAGM put VOA employees, including Director Michael Abramowitz, on administrative leave, the law firm noted in its summary. Abramowitz and others quickly filed suit and obtained a temporary restraining order blocking the administration from dismantling VOA. The government appealed, and the matter is now with the appeals court. The brief argues that for over 80 years, Congress has consistently reaffirmed and reinforced the principle that to achieve its aims and win over global audiences, the VOA must be a free and independent source of news. This is one of multiple legal actions challenging the administration decision. Among them, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty has sued USAGM to get its funding grant back. In March, USAGM senior advisor Carrie Lake said that waste, fraud, and abuse run rampant in USAGM. She alleged that the agency had been victimized by national security violations, including spies and terrorist sympathizers, spent hundreds of millions on fake news companies, and put out a product that often parrots the talking points of America's adversaries. So this is an ongoing battle with a lot of people that want to try to have the funding back. Is that going to happen? Is the funding going to ever come back? It's, I think, highly doubtful, but who knows? If you don't try, you'll never know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. The claims that they're making about what VOA was, I'm sure these employees that are putting forward this opposition are going to try to disclaim those claims and try to prove that the service was doing something honorable and was respected by listeners around the world and needed by listeners around the world.
Yep.
It is a voice of the United States going out to the rest of the world. Now they're not hearing that anymore. So I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering just, what is going on in the United States. So we'll see. I don't know. I guess I kind of feel like you do that once you take the steps that they've taken, it's hard to reverse things. So We'll see where it all ends up. In a somewhat related story, we have from Radio World, judge grants RFERL injunction in funding suit. Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, continuing to fight for its existence, welcomed a ruling by a federal district court judge. It said Judge Royce Lamberth granted RFERL's request for a preliminary injunction in its lawsuit against the U.S. Agency for Global Media. He ordered USAGM to disperse the rest of the agency's congressionally appropriated funds for fiscal year 2025. RFERL said Lamberth wrote that it was unprecedented for an agency to demand that new terms govern its working relationship with a grantee entity and then stop responding, particularly when the agency is statutorily obligated to grant yearly congressional appropriations to the specific entity by name. He cited USAGM's flagrant disregard for its funding responsibilities. President and CEO Stephen Capus welcomed the ruling. Time and time again, the court has ruled in our favor on the basic issue of the release of our congressionally appropriated funds. Radio World has invited comment from USAGM and will report on any reply. The organization reports to 23 countries in Europe and Asia. In March, USAGM senior advisor Carrie Lake said that waste, fraud, and abuse run rampant in the USAGM. She alleged that the agency has been victimized by massive national security violations, including spies and terrorist sympathizers and/or supporters infiltrating the agency, that it had issued eye-popping self-dealing involving contracts, grants, and high-value settlement agreements, spent hundreds of millions on fake news companies, and put out a product that often parrots the talking points of America's adversaries. So some of the items there that were reported in the previous story. But this is a positive thing, at least for RFERL. It looks like they will get their funding at least for 2025. After that, we don't know what will happen.
In our next story, we have a trailer released for WNEW-FM documentary, Where Rock Lived, by Lance Venta, Radio Insight. A teaser trailer has been released for an upcoming documentary on the rock format of 102.7 WNEW-FM New York. The documentary's logline says, Where Rock Lived, tells the story of WNEW-FM, a radio station that gave voice to a generation. It shaped cultural identity and was a musical touchstone, amplifying the legendary artists and bands who defined America's youth, soul, and rebellion. The film contrasts the freeform ethos of WNEW-FM's golden era with today's highly syndicated and algorithm-driven radio landscape. It features archival footage of new interviews with artists including Gene Simmons of Kiss, Todd Rundgren, John Anderson, Yes, Joan Jett, Mike Love of Beach Boys, Marky Ramone of the Ramones, and Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, along with former WNEW-FM staffers Dennis Elsis, Richard Neer, Mark Chernoff, Robin Sagan, and Bob Merowitz. Executive producer Tony Monte said WNEW-FM was a reflection of America's young generation who came of age through its DJs, bands, and music, celebrating a counterculture that impacted millions of disillusioned youth. The result of how a rebellious few and the music it produced shaped a way of life validates that 102.7 made a difference. In an era focused on PPM and centralized programming, we explore a time when relationships between the DJ, artist, and listener was the most important algorithm. This film is not just nostalgia, it's a case study in how the power of live, local, and personality-focused broadcasting can affect a nation. And indeed, we need that. This is what's fun in radio.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to this documentary, and I think it's something that younger people will need to look at and see the way that radio was done and how important not just the music, but the personalities behind it and the whole package that was presented over the radio really influenced a lot of people. It taught a lot of people about these artists and introduced them to new music, things that just aren't happening anymore in radio. So check this out. I don't know when it will be coming out, but it'll be something to look for. It's called Where Rock Lived, and focusing on WNEW-FM in New York City.
So, what's happening with our sun? There is a lot of little sunspots on the sun, but most of them don't seem to be dangerous for now for any flaring. Sunspot number 137, the solar flux 156. And if things keep quiet, well, this week could be an interesting week to listen to the radio. One thing I started noticing is that we're already a month past the solstice, and it starts to show on the bands that there's some propagation differences starting to show up as we move into August soon. But to witness all of this, you got to turn on a radio and listen.
This is Glenn Hauser, on the air since 1987. You're tuned to the International Radio Report, 30 minutes of radio about radio, every Sunday morning on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal, and live streaming around the globe at ckut.ca.
We talked about personality-driven radio and the importance of radio in our last story. This is an interesting survey that was done on radio listening, and it comes from Dana Schaeffer in Radio Inc. AM/FM radio still number one in daily U.S. audio use, Edison says. Even as the number of available audio entertainment choices gets larger by the day, Americans still have a clear favorite, AM/FM. While streaming music has carved out a strong second-place position, traditional radio still leads by a double-digit margin. Even YouTube, with its wide adoption of music consumption, falls 20 percentage points behind traditional radio. In Q2 2025, Edison Research's Share of Ear survey asked Americans how they divide their daily audio time. That data, combined with listening behavior as far back as Q3 of 2024, shows that listeners aged 13 and up spend just over one-third of their audio day, or 34%, with traditional or streamed radio. That figure surpasses every other audio platform, including streaming music services, 23%, YouTube at 14%, and podcasts, 10%. SiriusXM accounts for just 7% of listening time, while owned music and audiobooks trail at 6% and 3% respectively. TV music channels and other formats collectively make up only 3% of total listening. The findings reinforce AM/FM's central role in the daily audio habits of Americans, even amid mounting competition from subscription-based and algorithm-driven platforms. Edison's data includes all over-the-air and radio stream listening in its AM/FM measurement, underscoring radio's cross-platform reach. However, this is a measurable slip for radio from 2 years ago. In Q2 2023, AM/FM held a 36% share of all daily audio listening, according to Edison, compared to streaming music's only 18%, showing a few points ceded. SiriusXM also lost a percentage point, while most other sources held steady. The trend reflects how smartphones, smart speakers, and on-demand platforms have reshaped listening habits over the past few years as new technology, devices, and services have continually altered the way people engage with radio. Not overly surprising, I don't think. Radio's the quickest to get to. In the car, especially, you're driving somewhere, turn on the radio. You may have your favorite station. You may be listening to news. You may be listening to music, sports, what have you. I think radio in one package offers you all those different things at the touch of a button, moving from one station to another sort of thing. So I guess it's not overly surprising that so many people still lean towards that. Although I think, the age spread starting at 13, I wonder how many of those, say, 13 to 20 people are still using the radio versus other things.
Yeah.
Maybe you move up another, 20 to 35, something like that. I think they need to break that down more into different categories to see where the listeners are on the chart that are still listening to AM/FM.
Yeah, that would be important because I think we would have some interesting numbers to look at there. And we have to think about the fact that radio is free. So that also is an important factor for a lot of people. So in our next news story, we have a story from the Philippines where a radio anchor shot dead. This is via Radio Info Asia. Erwin Labitad Segovia, 63, a Radio WNEW-FM anchor and station manager at Radio Gugma, was shot in the head by unidentified assailants while riding his motorcycle home shortly after completing his morning broadcast in Bislig City, in the province of Surigao del Sur, on the eastern coast of Mindanao Island. Segovia, particularly known as Boy Pana, was well known for his hard-hitting commentary on local governance and social issues during his on-air program. Authorities have launched an investigation and have activated a special investigation task group to handle the case, says Jose Torres Jr., Executive Director of the Presidential Task Force on Media Security. The safety of journalists remains a priority for the government, and justice for victims of media-related violence continues to be a national concern, Torres said. More than 200 journalists have been killed in the country since democracy was restored in 1986, according to the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, including 32 in a single incident in 2009 in the south of the country. Segovia is the fifth radio journalist killed in the Philippines since Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office in June 2022. In 2025, the country ranked 116th out of 180 in the Reporters Sans Frontières World Press Freedom Index. It currently ranks 9th on the Committee to Protect Journalists, the CPJ, 2024 Global Impunity Index, which tracks countries where killings of journalists frequently go unpunished. Philippine authorities must leave no stone unturned in identifying and prosecuting those responsible for the murder of journalist Erwin Labitad Segovia, said Sean Crispin. If President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s administration fails to act more decisively, the cycle of impunity will persist, and so will the media killings. That's another story where in some countries it's difficult to have a opinion, especially against your own government or people in power, and things can happen to you. You can suddenly disappear.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of those types of stories, and Philippines seems to be a particularly dangerous country for that sort of thing. Our final story today is an interesting one. It could be a couple reasons behind this one. We're not quite sure, but it comes to us from the Taiwan News via Radio Info Asia. It's written by Keoni Everington. Residents and visitors in Taichung, Taiwan have reported hearing Chinese propaganda broadcasts on local radio frequencies, prompting authorities to investigate potential cross-strait signal interference. Reports indicate that in Taichung's district, as well as mountainous areas, people can clearly receive China's state-run Fujian People's Radio on FM 96.7. The National Communications Commission said Monday that on-site testing is necessary to determine whether the interference is persistent. A tourist in a National Forest recreation area said they were surprised to hear the broadcast when tuning on their car radio. The signal reportedly remained audible back to the urban areas. In Taiwan, the frequency is reserved for WNEW-FM 96.7. However, a Liberty Times reporter tuning in from Taichung heard an announcer with a Chinese Mandarin accent say the time is now 2 p.m. Beijing time. This is the news from Fujian People's Radio. Known as the Voice of Fujian, the station airs content jointly with China Central Television. The station directly transmits official news from Chinese state-run media. NCC Secretary General Huang Wenqi told CNA that more data is needed to determine whether the interference is sporadic or recurring. If it is found to be ongoing, the NCC may need to work with other agencies to adjust Taiwan's frequency allocations. So the first thing that came to my mind was, if this is not consistent, could it have been a case of skip conditions, either E-skip or tropospheric skip conditions, which we've talked about on the show, and any of our DXers out there who do FM DXing will understand. But is it that, or is it something that was intentional?
Yeah, I think if it doesn't happen again soon, it's probably not intentional. And, FM stations, when skip opens up, can sometimes be so strong they can just overpower other stations. I remember a few times it happened here while I was listening to some of the FM broadcasts where I could actually distinctly see that there was some interference coming from stations from the United States. And I mean, not just across the border. One particularly that amazed me was one from Florida. So we have some upcoming amateur radio DXPEDITIONS and special events.
We have one of the National Contest Journal's major events taking place next weekend. It's the North American QSO Party, the CW portion of that contest, 1800 Zulu August 2nd to 0559 Zulu August the 3rd. It's all of the major HF bands, 160 through 10 meters, no WARC bands, and the mode, as we said, is CW. So that'll be a pretty popular event for CW operators.
And into our DXPEDITIONS, we have Rodrigues Isl Philipp, Delta Kilo 6 Sierra Papa, will be operating as 3 Bravo 9 Sierra Papa between July 28th and August 1st. And he will be QRV from 40 to 10 meters using CW, Morse code, SSB, and some digital modes. And if you're in the site of QO100 satellite, there will be satellite contacts also.
Next in Kenya, Ben Victor Echo 3 November Zulu, a Canadian, is in Nairobi, operating as 5 Zulu 4 November Zulu until August the 5th. QRV on HF, but using mainly CW, and you can QSL him via his home call, VE3NZ.
Svalbard, Jarosla, Sierra Papa 9 Hotel Golf November, is operating as Juliet Whiskey / his call and /P until August 2nd, operation on 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters using single sideband, and perhaps some FT8 in QRP mode, low power. He plans to be QRV as Juliet Whiskey / Sierra Papa 9 Hotel Golf November /P from 3 summits for the summits on the air.
And finally, in Iceland, Nicholas, Foxtrot 5 Tango Golf Romeo, will be operating as Tango Foxtrot / his call between July 26th and August the 8th. He'll be on 40, 30, 20, 15, and 10 meters using CW, FT8, and SSB.
And we are out of time.
We thank you for tuning into our show. If you'd like to reach us by email, radioreport@yahoo.com is the address. Our show is live streaming and archived at ckut.ca. Our Facebook group, International Radio Report, look for us there. We invite you to join. And our YouTube channel is youtube.com/@IRR. You'll find our most recent show and previous shows that you can listen to at your convenience. That'll be it for us this week. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you again next Sunday morning on the International Radio Report here on CKUT 90.3 FM in Montreal. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.